I came home to say I am dying and found my husband dancing someone else to our wedding song. That is how the day split into. I, female, 58 years old, pulled into our driveway with a box of warm blueberry scones on the passenger seat and a diagnosis burning a hole in my rib cage. He, my husband, male, 60 years old, glossy hair, smooth voice, city economic development director, had left his Tesla crooked in the street like a teenager. I walked in, scones steaming, and there he was in the living room, shirt half buttoned, swaying with a woman in a red sweater. The old vinyl crackled, our song, and a wine glass tipped on the coffee table, red bleeding into an old magazine. I was supposed to say stage 4, palliative, we have so little time. Instead, I froze in the cedar-clean smell of our house as her laugh pinged off the picture frames. He saw me first. His face did something, unraveled. Her hand slipped off his shoulder like a dropped ribbon. I do not remember what I said, maybe nothing. I remember the snow starting again outside and the slow, stupid drip from his cuff onto my grandmother's rug. Later, people will ask me why I did not start screaming. I was past screaming. I was watching a glass of Pinot tip and thinking, the rug cleaner is in the hall closet. I left without a word, carried my box of scones back to the car, and drove to my bakery's back lot. The oven heat hit me when I unlocked the side door, cinnamon air hugging my jacket. My hands were steady enough to slice twine off a stack of flour bags. Somewhere between inoperable and infidelity, your brain chooses the smaller catastrophe to hold. Mine chose the flour. By the end of this, I would stand in a room full of people who loved me and pull a quiet pin on a grenade. But that afternoon, I leaned my forehead to the cool stainless table and thought, what would you do if you found out the way I did? He called, he texted. I put my phone face down and let the screen strobe cold blue across the metal. From the alley, a bus exhaled. I stared at the box of blueberry scones meant for the saddest conversation of my life and realized I had just been handed a script with the last page already torn out. I would have to rewrite everything. I would have to survive the holidays pretending not to know. And at the end, I would choose my finale. When you kick a wall, you learn what is load-bearing. That night, I found the beams. I called my attorney Ruth, a woman who looks like she eats statutes for breakfast, and said, I need to change some things. She did not ask why. I heard the scratch of her pen through the receiver. Durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy, trust modifications. How soon can you come in? At my kitchen table, between a sweating glass of tap water and a plate of untouched scones, I opened my laptop. Our home security cameras have a privacy mode he swore he only used when we had parties. Fashionable, modern, all-in-one with an app. But years ago, when thieves were hitting storefronts on Maple Avenue, I added a second recorder. Local storage, no cloud, no app, old and ugly as a VCR. I clicked through the attic quiet footage. The living room camera holds the whole first floor in its ghostly eye. There they were. They started in the kitchen, laughing like teenagers, her hand raking his hair. They poured wine, they twirled, they left doors open. And after the camera view, the house microphones, meant for voice commands, picked up breathing you cannot unhear. It felt like reading my own autopsy report. I transferred what I needed to an encrypted thumb drive and labeled it Recipes Q4. I wrote a note to Ruth, for the record. I did not want a Hollywood confrontation. I wanted clean lines. He'll contest if you cut him out entirely, Ruth said the next morning, flipping through my old trust. Some states allow a spousal elective share. Her pen tapped fast as a metronome. We will leave a token, $1, and an explanation. I thought of a comment someone once said about betrayal. Should betrayal be exposed publicly? I looked down at my hands. Flour still ghosted my knuckles. No public scene, not yet, but I want a record. Ruth nodded. Then we film it. On her advice, I booked a videographer who usually does weddings. I wanted the opposite of a wedding, I told him on the phone while the espresso machine hissed in the background. He laughed until he heard the rest. We live in a small town that smells like wood smoke and fried dough in December. Maple Avenue's wreaths blink the kind of LED white that makes your teeth ache. I decided to keep the holidays intact for my family. My son, male, 34 years old, lives 3 hours away with his wife and a toddler who says "na-na" for bananas. My daughter, female, 32 years old, teaches 3rd grade and still brings me finger-painted cards from her students, glitter in the folds. They have stepfather memories of my husband. He came into our lives when they were teenagers. He taught my son to drive on the old fairground strip and coached my daughter through college applications with yellow sticky notes all over our fridge. That is the part that makes you question your mind. People can be many things in one skin. Maybe that is why I wanted to preserve the illusion long enough to drink cocoa by the space heater with my granddaughter and see her breath fog the window. I told my mother, female, 81 years old, what I could. She held my hands in the booth at Silver Diner while a waitress slid meatloaf between us and the jukebox played a crackly Elvis cover. "Do you want to go nuclear?" my mother asked, calm, almost clinical. "I want peace," I said, "and a clean end." She buttered her roll with tiny, precise movements. Then we aimed for that. At home, he did his best impression of normal. Mark cooked lemon chicken and made a mess of the stovetop. He kept trying to touch my shoulder. I kept moving away as if I had forgotten where mayonnaise was stored. We slept back to back, strangers renting the same bed. I could feel the words he wanted to say gather behind his teeth like a traffic jam. He had no idea mine were a freight train. I watched storms roll in from the bakery window, the streetlights fogging halos. "Would you take action or stay silent, my baker, Marisol?" asked me gently as we folded dough, unaware that she had said out loud the question I had been crawling around for days. Flour hung in the air like a promise I could not keep. The countdown to Christmas twisted time into taffy. My daughter hung paper snowflakes in our living room. My son installed a Bluetooth speaker for carols that made my phone suggest playlists called Cozy Cocoa Nights. Mark wore a sweater with tiny foxes on it and poured cider and laughed with my son about a football game. His laugh sounded like an old recording, familiar and somehow off, as if the cassette had wrinkled. I filmed the will video at Ruth's office 2 days before Christmas Eve. The conference room smelled like dry paper and peppermint from a bowl of candy canes. The videographer set up soft lights that made every line on my face look like something I had earned. I spoke directly to the camera. I said the words I thought would break me and felt something else happen. Clarity, like pond ice freezing clear. I explained the diagnosis. I said I loved my children and my granddaughter and my mother. I said the bakery would stay in the family and that the trust would remain in their control. I said, "Mark, you will receive $1. I am not doing this out of spite. I am doing it to tell the truth." I slid the thumb drive across the table and tapped it once with my finger. This is why. I included instructions that the video would be played at a small, private will reading, not at my funeral. I would not make my last act a circus. But I also left a sealed envelope with Ruth in case the story needed to be told later, in case the town's rumor mill tried to grind me into something I was not. "Inside is a letter for everyone who loves me," I said, "and one for the woman in the red sweater." On the way home, I bought a peppermint hot chocolate from a food truck. The paper cup warmed my gloves, and the wind off the river smelled like metal. I parked 2 blocks from home because our street was full. My neighbor's inflatable snowman wheezed around and stared at me with permanent cheer. When I opened our front door, the house was bright and noisy and smelled like cinnamon pine cones and garlic. Mark swept me into a hug, and for a second I leaned into the lie. "You are my home," he whispered. My ribs ached. He did not cheat, a voice hissed in my head. He built a double life. Mid-December gave me an odd gift, leverage. At 3 in the morning on Christmas Eve, awake and listening to the baseboard heat tick like a metronome, I remembered a thing Mark had bragged about 3 summers ago over margaritas. His department had set up a public-private innovation hub, which was code for funneling investment into pet projects. He mentioned a real estate redevelopment shell and a supportive angel investor who had carried them through a bad quarter. He liked to play savior. I liked to balance our checkbook. What he did not know, years back, when I bought the building that holds the bakery, I folded it into a family trust my father had set up, the kind with an iron spine. When a different project on our block was about to collapse, I loaned a little money through that trust to keep my block alive. The loan was small enough to be invisible to town gossip and large enough to command a pledge. If certain covenants were breached, voting control shifted to the trust until the debt was repaid. I had forgotten the clause until I found the folder at the bottom of the fireproof box with the smell of old paper and the clip's steel bite. Ruth was almost gleeful when I brought it in. "You see this?" She tapped the paragraph with a red nail. "If his angel is who I think it is, the widow with the red sweater who owns that boutique development company, you, my darling, have a lever." It turned out the woman in my living room moonlighted as the angel. It turned out the little refinance Mark orchestrated last year had tripped my covenant when he filed a sloppy amendment without my consent. It turned out control of a key vote, one that determined who ran day-to-day operations of their shiny hub, had quietly slid into the trust, which meant into Ruth's hands the second I signed. I signed. The pen scratched through an odd piece. My mother watched me with that hawk calm face of hers and said, while peeling clementines at my kitchen island, "Do not tell him. Let the paper tell him." The citrus smell threaded the air. I imagined it. After I am gone, a tidy letter arrives at their office stating that due to covenant breach, the trust assumes interim voting control. Someone else signs his paychecks. Someone else changes the locks. No shouting, no scandal, just consequence. In the quiet after she left, I stood in the doorway to our bedroom and watched him sleep with his mouth slightly open, the sound like a low whistle. "Do you think revenge heals or harms?" I whispered to the dark. My chest felt like a cracked bell. Christmas Day was a diorama. The scent of maple-glazed ham, the smack of my granddaughter's hands on wrapping paper, scarves and beanies piled on the radiator, a Hallmark movie that would not shut up. Mark played host like a man auditioning for sainthood. He fetched my mother tea with honey. He handed my daughter a small box with a gold bracelet. He toasted to health and then refused to meet my eyes. We ate pie. We laughed in all the right places. We took a photo on the front steps, breath fogging, ice crusting the porch rail, the tiny reindeer in the planter half buried in snow like it had fainted. My son wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and his palm was warm through my sweater. "You are quiet," he said softly while we waited for the kettle. "I am practicing listening," I said, which was true. That night, after the dishwasher hummed itself into a lullaby, Mark came into our room with a careful face. "You have been somewhere else for days," he said. I stared at my hands. "I got some news," I said. He sat slowly, as if a dog had been placed where he could not see. "Is it bad?" I told him, not the affair, the other thing. The thing with the big shadow and no polite way to say it. The words came out neat as grocery lists. Stage 4, not operable. Months, not years. My husband covered his mouth and then reached for me, and I let him. He cried, I did not. He said over and over, "We will fight," and I said in a voice I barely recognized, "I am so tired of fighting." In some other version of my life, this is where he becomes a hero, drops the act, and champions every minute we have left. In this version, he kept glancing toward his phone on the dresser like it might alert him to a storm delay at the airport. When I finally fell asleep, his phone lit up the ceiling with that cold aurora. I lay there, awake again, knowing I would give my children one last holiday memory with me involved, and then I would deliver my truth. Would you take revenge in my place? The day of my reading came in late January, after the tree on the town square was taken down and the sidewalks were gray with salt. I had my hair blown out because my daughter insisted, and I wore the navy dress I bought for charity dinners. The conference room at Ruth's office felt smaller than last time. My mother sat at my left, a small, solid presence with a scarf that smelled like lavender. My son and daughter held hands in a way that made me feel like I had finished my one good job. Mark sat across from me in a charcoal suit that used to make me want to kiss his neck in elevators. The woman in the red sweater was not there. Ruth nodded to the videographer, who lifted a remote. The screen lit blue. It is strange to watch yourself speak, like meeting a relative you almost remember. I explained my choices. The camera loved no one, it just told the truth. When I slid the thumb drive across the table in the video, the real me slid the real thumb drive across the real table. Ruth plugged it in. The footage of the living room filled the screen. Wine, laughter, our song a faint ghost. The camera moved when I told it to, cutting before it became indecent. The microphones captured enough. Mark's face folded. He went the color of unbaked bread. My son made a sound like a chair scraping a floor. My daughter whispered, "Oh, Dad," like she had stepped on a nail and did not want to frighten anyone. My mother's hand found mine under the table and squeezed twice. "We are here." "I wanted you to hear this from me," I said to the room at large, but I did not want to detonate Christmas. The radiator knocked once, as if in agreement. I have chosen not to file for divorce. I have chosen to spend my remaining time with the people who deserve it. The trust documents are updated. The bakery is in order. Mark, you will receive $1. This is not because I wish you harm. This is because I wish myself peace. He tried on a dozen faces like hats in a thrift store. Remorse, outrage, indignation. Then he settled on pleading. "We can fix this," he said. It was a mistake." I looked at the peppermint bowl on the table, the same one as last time, and thought, how lovely to believe damage is confetti. You do not get a soundtrack the day after you blow up your life, but you do get strange, sharp details. The bakery mixer's whir sounded like a plane taking off. The back alley smelled like cat food and snow. A child pressed her face to the glass and fogged it into a thumbprint cloud. And at home, a neat manila envelope waited. The Innovation Hub had been informed of a change in governance. Effective immediately, the trust would assume interim voting control due to a breach of covenant documented on page 5. My signature curved at the bottom like a hand placing a blanket. Mark moved into the guest room. He did not rage. He simmered. He brought me tea with too much honey and hovered in doorways, and sometimes a ghost of the man I married would show up in the crease between his eyebrows. He asked once, with a decent softness, "Do you think I owed you more patience?" I turned off the sink and heard my own voice, clear. "You owed me honesty. You owed me a choice." The town, because towns do what towns do, began to whisper. The woman in the red sweater stopped coming to our gym at 6 in the morning. People are marvelous at pretending. I kept my head down and my bakery open and my granddaughter in cookie dough and my mother stocked with apricot jam. On a Tuesday, I set up my medical binder with tabs that smelled faintly of plastic and peppermint. On a Thursday, I held my daughter's hand while she cried for the father she had, and then the father she had discovered, and then her mother, who would not be there next Christmas to show her how to fix a broken pie crust. Is cheating about love, lust, or disrespect? She asked, raw. I kissed her hair. Sometimes it is about cowardice, I said, and sometimes it is about a hole someone thinks another person can fill. A week later, Mark came to the bakery after closing. The front bell chimed, the neon open sign buzzed even though it was off. He stood there on flour-dusted tiles in a suit and sneakers, ridiculous and human. I want to help, he said, with the appointments, with hospice, if you... He trailed off. I studied him like a recipe I knew could never rise. You may help, I said, but you do not get to pretend. He nodded and looked at his hands like a boy caught stealing taffy. Is betrayal a reflection of them or of me? He asked, maybe to himself. I did not answer. I was tired. I packed a white box with 2 lemon bars and handed it to him without a word, the way you hand someone a map they will not read. My last spring came early. The river thawed and the sycamores shook out their gray sleeves. I grew softer around my edges and the world sharpened. Friends started dropping by with casseroles that smelled like nutmeg and nostalgia. My baker, Marisol, taped up a Polaroid wall. Me in a blue apron dusted with sugar, my granddaughter with sprinkles on her nose, my mother refusing to smile and then accidentally doing it. I spent afternoons on the bench out front watching delivery trucks hiss and pigeons argue like old men. I filmed one more video, sitting on that bench in evening sun so warm it made the bakery windows glow. It was not a will. It was me talking to whoever would watch later, my children, my granddaughter, maybe a girl who would grow up and work the morning shift. I told them the bakery secret to flaky pastry and the human secret to surviving. Choose your endings with care. They are how people will remember your beginnings. On my last week, Mark showed up at the house with a small box. In it, a key. To the red sweater's condo, he said, voice thin. I ended it. I told her the truth. I thought about all the ways truth arrives too late. He sat across from me and said, would you ever give someone one last chance? I looked past him, out the window, to the street lamp flickering on like a thought. I already did, I said. I gave it to me. At my farewell party, just family, just friends, trays of baklava and my mother's rugelach on paper plates, a playlist full of songs that never once were ours, I stood and told a story about the first time I burned a tray of croissants so badly they looked like fossils. People laughed. I said thank you. I said I was not brave, just stubborn with my minutes. And when it got quiet, I said the one line I had been saving, the one that rang like a bell in my bones. He did not just cheat, he bet my last months on a lie. The room held its breath. My son put his arm around my shoulders. Outside, the street smelled like rain on hot pavement, and somewhere downriver, a train blew its long, low horn. I felt very light, and that is when I realized loving myself was not revenge, it was release.